Hello, everybody. It's Julia Hummingbird Jewel, and this is SOUL-utions, a book review show for mind readers. And today we have Danielle Aitken, and her book is Sarah's Story, Life After IVF. And my mission statement is to teach love by being an example of love. And what better way than to showcase authors, find out what's behind their books. Why did they write them? And we also every week showcase a cause, because I believe in the principle of service and giving back. And so I asked Danielle what her cause was going to be. And she said, and it's called It's Okay to Not Be Okay. And their mission is to educate, support, and assist mental health battles and to promote suicide prevention in the community. And I always put the cause's Facebook page and website in the notes, whether you're watching it in a replay on YouTube or on Facebook, so you can look into their cause if that resonates to you. You can always help by just promoting social media if you don't have time or money to give. So remember, it's a spiritual axiom to give back. Okay, Danielle Aitken. She's a highly experienced nurse and midwife. She has over 20 years in the cutting edge of IVF in Australia. She actually got up at 6 a.m. to do Facebook Live. I'm considering changing the time on my show if I get any more Australians. That's kind of a mean thing to do.
Good job.
That she's a counselor now, also in a hypnotherapist in her own successful private practice. And she can assist people to move through trauma and crises by helping them discover their inner strengths. She has all kinds of diplomas and certificates: clinical hypnotherapy, analytical hypnotherapy, NLP. Of course, she's a registered nurse and midwife. She is a practitioner of sexual and reproductive health, practical genetics, childbirth education, grief counseling, and something called BWRT, brain working recursive therapy. Did I say that right?
Yes, yes.
I practiced. Hopefully you can tell us what that is. I was like, that sounds very interesting. But Danielle utilizes a combination of all these counseling techniques to achieve optimal results for her clients. Now, she's not just an expert on infertility. She has great success in effectively dealing with anxiety, phobias, compulsive behaviors, relationship and lifestyle issues, also addictions such as alcohol, smoking, drugs, and chronic pain management, which is how I met her. We are both Dr. Joe Dispenza advanced students. So she was in my group posting about her book, and I thought the book was going to be about her story of self-healing, which she did do. But I'm going to let you speak to that, Danielle. Before we talk about your book, how did this book come about, and how did Dr. Joe Dispenza come into the whole thing?
Well, the book came about because I worked in IVF for 20 years. I was on my own journey during the end part of that of learning, and I went on quite a journey of learning and discovery where, I wanted more skills myself to help deal with the people who were struggling so much. I guess my whole life has really been around helping people in one way or another. So I wanted to get more skills for that, and I became a counsellor while I was still working in IVF, which actually led me to really become fascinated with what was possible with the power of the mind, what we could achieve. And so I just gained a thirst for knowledge, and I went searching. I had my own health issues at the time, which I'd always had and I'd always managed. And I stumbled across a wonderful person called Joe Dispenza. I know I was looking at Bruce Lipton. I was just searching, and I liked it. Really resonated with me what I heard, because Joe and Bruce are always talking about the mind. I also became a clinical hypnotherapist at that point too, because it just fitted nicely with that. And so I started to really study and learn about what was possible, and I was astounded really to see, what actually was possible. And interestingly enough, as I think as part of my learning, I actually became quite unwell. It began when I broke my ankle. And this condition that I'd had, an autoimmune type condition, an inflammatory condition, escalated out of all control to the point where I really, my total body was affected. And it's interesting, as I was thinking about your show today and what I might speak about, I was reflecting on that journey and just how far I have come. And I even have not forgotten, but it's sometimes a bit shocking to me to remember just how bad I was. You know, I had every joint almost was not really functioning. My knees weren't able to bend very well. My feet particularly were the biggest problem. I had real difficulty walking, and I had times where, you know, wheelchairs were required if there was any distance. I permanently had, you know, crutches in my car, which were a problem in themselves because my hands didn't like crutches. My hands were a problem. I wore braces on my wrists. Driving was okay because I had wheels, but my hand was a problem, you know, using the wheel, so I needed to wear hand braces. And it was my back. When I really think back, it's like, wow, yeah, that was a problem. And as I reflected, it was interesting because I was on this journey. I learned and studied everything that Joe had to offer. I was reading his books, but it wasn't until this year, and I was still on my journey, and it wasn't until and I still am on my journey, of course, and it wasn't until this year, in end of April, May, that I went to one of Joe's advanced workshops in Queensland, which was quite shocking to me when I went there because it was different, very different and very intense to what I was expecting. I just thought it would be like any other workshop. You know, you come along at 9 o'clock, you finish at 5, but
you work too hard.
It's certainly not that bad, you know. I mean, wow, gosh, that for me was really the turning point, because prior to that, I would say the 2 or 3 years I had not been able to really walk a great deal, and walking was my passion. I live by the ocean. Walking is what I have always done, and I wasn't able to do it. I literally every step at one point, every single step I took was calculated and planned, so that I knew if I had to get from A to B over a period of hours, I'd be able to stop here. You know, even I'm talking like, even my daughter does athletics, even like 100-meter track, I wouldn't be able, I'd have to, you know, plan my journey and stop, you know, sit here for a bit and then do a few steps, sit here, go to the toilet here while I was passing, and then move on to the other end, you know, a few hours later when she needed to be there. So it was really, and a lot of my friends didn't actually know that I was going through it because of what I understood the mind and the brain and our health and our bodies to be and work like. I didn't want to be focusing on it, and focusing on it meant speaking about it. So I had friends who really weren't even aware that I was going through this. But, you know, I continued in my work as I could. My clients were unaware as well. I would take some very painful steps into my consulting room, sit, do what I had to do, and then take some very painful steps back out again, because, yeah, I really didn't want to focus any attention on it. I wanted to keep meditating and doing the work that Joe does, and focus on my the way that I actually wanted my body to be and respond. Because, I mean, science is amazing. It tells us now that every single thought we have, our body responds immediately, chemically, physically. So I had to be very careful. And it was a journey because I wasn't getting not instantly, but I wasn't getting as quickly the results that I thought I should. So there was a challenge there too, that I thought, I'm here sitting telling people about this work that I do, saying that you can heal your body, and here I wasn't able to heal mine. Yeah. So it was a real journey. But the turning point was actually when I was out to the advanced retreat. And oh my gosh, I was actually, this is when I remembered I was wearing the brace on my hand into about day 3, and I threw that away. That was gone. And I've never worn that. I have never worn that since. and that's when I actually began to walk as well. And in the walking meditation on the beach, it was the most amazing experience of my life, I would say. And I had tears streaming down my face. And I think unless you've been there and understand what goes on, it's hard to get your head around that. But I just physically could not walk on the sand, and I powered down that beach, really, tears down my face. It was just an epiphany. It was beautiful.
And
yeah,
then
and I
took the opportunity to write a book, correct?
Yeah, well, I'd actually written the book before the advanced, because before the advanced, naturally, I had a great deal of time where I wasn't actually able to do much at all. Literally couldn't even take a few steps some occasions. I had to be wheeled even to the bathroom at night on some occasions. So my lovely husband had to really step up and do so much. There were parts of my house I couldn't access. I couldn't get down to the laundry. So he had to do.
That's a little convenient.
That was a little convenient.
A little sore. No.
Seriously, because it's down a set of stairs and I couldn't make it down. And that's where the garage is too. So when I did get to my car, he would have to go down, bring the car up to where I could access it. And so there was a lot of change required and a lot of strategies implemented. But yeah, I had a lot of time, and I thought I had no option. Well, I did, I suppose I had options, but I had no option other than to think of what I could do, because I knew very well what I couldn't do. And again, I didn't want to focus on that. So I thought, what can I do? And I had this book in my head for maybe 5 or 6 years, where I actually wrote the first chapter and knew what I wanted to write, knew what I wanted to achieve, because it is a book about healing as well. The story is about IVF, and I wrote it to help people in IVF, but it's also a story just about life and about relationships and about healing and about overcoming and creating a new outcome when perhaps your outcome isn't the one you thought it was going to be. And so this, my health condition, I'm not even going to call it anything else, it allowed me time. It allowed me plenty of time. So, and I thought to myself, well, no, my brain is working perfectly, and that's what I do have, and that's what I'm going to use. So maybe I can't walk, and maybe I can't do lots of other things, but I can write. So I mean, maybe I couldn't write, but I could tap. I could tap on the computer.
I know, even your hands were hurting. I was thinking, oh, maybe it hurt a little bit for her to type. So let's talk.
I could type, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about what it's like to be an infertile couple, because what I got from the book, this is not just about women. It affects the men also. I mean, they must feel powerless, and then they also have to go through testing themselves, so their manhood is being tested. Can you speak to what infertility might do to a couple?
Yeah, sure. It does a lot, let me tell you. There are many, many relationships that actually don't even survive the process. So there are, constant and continual pressures month after month, and even during an IVF cycle, day after day. There are things that we ask and expect these couples to do, which aren't usual or natural. We have just the average Joe coming into the clinic, and they have to sit there and they have to talk to often young girls about the most intimate of details that maybe they haven't even told their mates. And their manhood is questioned at times. They're asked to do things. I mean, we ask them to go and produce samples, and that's really difficult. A really difficult thing to put someone on the spot to do that for some people, and it challenges them. But above all, I think women and men, they do cope with the situation differently. And the women would, from all appearances, seem to be affected more, but the men definitely are affected in their own ways, and often in unseen ways. They're behind the scenes. They're not always, in the clinic, but they're dealing with the pressures of this wife, this person, this partner that they absolutely adore, going through these traumas and trials, and they question everything, because when you've had this as a vision, and it looks like it might not happen, it becomes fairly desperate in a lot of situations.
Yeah. And so, what about miscarriages? Are there a lot of miscarriages in IVF, or is it more common, or?
There are a lot, but I'm not too sure whether it is actually more common or whether it's just more obvious because this is the absolute focus, and people know that they're pregnant a lot more or a lot earlier than you would possibly know in the community. So obviously, you might just think you're a day or two late, and out there in the community might have no idea that in fact perhaps you've been pregnant. One in about 5 pregnancies end in miscarriage. And that's very obvious in the clinic because we're testing them at the earliest possible time. There might be a small amount of hormone present, so then there's all of those. The wait between transfer and pregnancy test is very difficult, and then all the symptoms of I may be, I may not be, and then to do the test, and they have to wait the day, and occasionally that we give them what we call an inconclusive result, which is not much fun. And they're not expecting that. So then they're are they pregnant? Are they not? Yes, inconclusive basically means that they've got pregnancy hormones, so technically they are. But if it's inconclusive, the levels aren't very high. So that in itself, everything along the journey is really quite stressful.
There's such a stigma with a miscarriage because people don't really treat it the same as a death, but it is to the mother.
Oh, absolutely.
We don't really have funerals for miscarriages. You know what I'm saying? So
I do.
It's so hard. And then nobody knows what to say. And then people, they say things that they don't know they're saying that's hurtful, or there's, like, oh, you just forget about it and you'll get pregnant. Meanwhile, they're getting pregnant and your family members are getting pregnant and you're not getting pregnant. And it's difficult for the woman to go through that. And I'm sure for the man too, So what kind of things should you say to somebody that's trying to conceive? Is there anything that's like helpful?
That's a minefield.
It's so hard that I can't think of it myself,
Look, I think the main thing is to be supportive and to in some way try and understand. And it is hard for someone who has children or isn't trying. It's hard for them to understand. And even, it spreads further than just the relationship because there's pressures that are put on people when they're going through a cycle, additional pressures, even from well-meaning people, from family. Oh, how's it going? Are you pregnant yet? How's this cycle going? When are you having your pregnancy test? So they feel like they have to perform almost, and when the result comes back negative, it can be quite devastating. So a lot of people choose then to hibernate a little bit and maybe not tell people that they're doing it, so because it's less stressful in the long run, because they don't have to deal with all the aftermath if things don't go the way they want. But in doing that also, they're not getting the support that they could potentially be getting. I would recommend that people don't say to people, just go on holiday, you'll get pregnant. And obviously, what we now know about the brain and the body is that stress is a factor. Stress is a major factor. And I suppose this I also wanted to get across in the book, because the second part of the book is more, the first part of the book was to educate. It was to, educate family and friends who are along the journey with them as to exactly what goes on and the heartbreak and over, and I hope I got that across. But the second part of the book is more uplifting in a sense, in that it's more directed towards what is possible, using mind-body therapies, what is possible to create beneficial outcomes. And even though you don't get the outcome that you wanted for the women that are finished, they can create something valuable. They can find the value in their trauma or the bad experience, as I had to in my health experience. I found the value in that, and the value in that was that I am far more insightful now about health issues. I can use that in my business to help people going through similar things. I know the power of the mind and the body now, that it can heal. As I said before, I'm still on my journey. I'm not quite there, but I'm so close. I've gone from about 20% to about 85%, I think. So it feels amazing, and I love this work and I love our potential. But the second part of the book, it actually, I said there was this 5 to 7 year wait, I guess. I can't remember exactly how long, but I think that was also required and necessary, I believe, in perfect timing. And I actually had to learn some things myself, and in order to write that second part of the book. I knew the first part, knew it very well.
Right.
But the second part, I had to learn about all this potential, and that was where I met Joe Dispenza, and who actually has a copy of the book, by the way.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Because I asked you, I was like, is this your personal story? She's like, it's a compilation of all my previous clients, like bits and pieces of stories over the 20 years. And I thought that was just so beautiful. And this story reads like a movie. I hate to be cliche. Danielle Steele writes kind of that way. I mean, that's how beautifully written it is. It flows. It's a story. It's uplifting. You go through her whole life from childhood, so you get to know the character and what she goes through, and she meets, her. It's really a great story. It's not clinical and, this is what IVF and these are the steps. It's a beautiful story, so you can kind of really get the feeling of what it might be like for someone. And then also, like she said, what's it like when you figure out you're not going to have children? Like, okay, now it's a done deal. You've tried, you've done this. And that happened to me personally. And I woke up and I'd lost my last ovary. And I was in my 40s, so technically I probably could have had IVF, but there's an expense factor to it. And for me, that stopped me. And I was a dark, dark moment in my life. But I turned it around, and I got a message that I could be a mother to many. And so I didn't adopt, like some people would say, well, you can adopt children. But I went on mission trips, and I became a Make-A-Wish volunteer, and I became a nanny for 8 years. So there is life after IVF, right?
Yeah, absolutely, there is. And it can be stunningly spectacular. And yeah, that's really what the message I wanted to get across. But also in saying that, I also wanted to, for the people who are now currently going through, there are very real and impacting things that you can do to help yourself. And that again comes back to the meditation and taking ourselves, because one of the main reasons people drop out of IVF is stress. And stress turns off fertility. We're not meant to be having babies when we're running away from the perceived threat that is threatening our lives. And so things like your immune system reduces, your cognition, your ability to think clearly decreases, your fertility decreases, because we're not actually meant to live in stress mode. We're meant to, and as human beings, we're the only species that can turn that on with our thoughts alone. So that's how powerful our thoughts are.
True. And that's called fight or flight. Like animals, it's like the impala all of a sudden sees the cheetah, it goes taking off like crazy. The cheetah's chasing it. The heart rate goes up, the cortisol. But for animals, as soon as the cheetah's gone, it just goes back to grazing. It's like, it's fine. But humans will keep running on this stress mode, and it's debilitating to our bodies. And so we need to practice mindfulness. Well, what about hypnotherapy? Do you think it's an alternative to IVF? Would you try that first?
I use hypnotherapy with infertile people. I think that certainly it's a little bit difficult to say which would come first, because usually people will come to hypnotherapy or start seeking alternative answers when there's a problem. So the infertility may possibly already exist. Most people don't expect that they're going to have a problem. So they might go a year or two and then discover. So I think generally the process would be that they would be involved in trying to conceive in some way. And IVF is often, along the journey, there might be options offered before actually IVF. They might have, Clomid or maybe even intrauterine insemination, things like that. But I definitely think that it should be included in programs, and there are some IVF programs around the world that are now using mind-body medicine. There's the Dormer Center in Boston, which is connected to Boston IVF, I believe, and they're using mind-body medicine. They've been doing it for some years, 20 years, I believe, and they have research now and evidence. They've done, clinical research, and they found that using a 10-week mind-body program, including meditation and mindfulness, they can improve their fertility success by 55%. So that's astounding.
Wow, that's wonderful.
That's
Oh, that's gotta be like told to the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was my message. That was what I wanted to get out to the world. So, I see people one-on-one, and I really thought the power of the written word is wonderful, and it has far more potential to get out there and help people.
Yeah, and it has a good potential to be a great movie.
Yeah.
Let's give it to some producers. Share, people, share.
Please, because I always imagine that. And actually, here we go. My manifesting.
You put it in your mind movie.
I did. I did. And I that was one of my visions, in my health. I had two things I was manifesting, and one was the book. I manifested the book through Joe's meditations before I went to the retreat. And I, in all that time I had while I was just laying in bed, but I also imagined a movie. So
she's an incredible woman. She's in debilitating pain. You're also a mother and a wife, and you're running a business. I didn't know you were still seeing your clients. And you write a book, you overcome, you throw away the crutch, go trotting down the beach.
I know.
See, this is what I love about this show, because this author writes a book, and okay, I'm reading this wonderful book, but do you know the story behind it? And that's kind of what I want people to, connect with the authors and what they go through and why they are, driven to produce a book. And so,
so I've got another one in the making that I'm about halfway through, and again, naturally, it's about service. It's about an issue that I'm concerned about, which is my cause, which is suicide, because I think that it is, far too prevalent, and one life lost is too many. And I really want to get messages across in that too, that there is help available, and that we are never alone, in spirit, we're never alone. And I really want to get that message across, that and the ripple effect of one death, that and how it impacts so many people. And I'm wondering what would happen if that person actually knew their true worth, actually knew how much they were loved and cherished by a whole community that is impacted by their death. So it's a bit of an interesting one. It's a heavy topic, but it's one as well I think needs to be written, and it's going to have a little bit of a, it's going to be a little bit surprising.
That sounds great. Yeah, she writes beautifully, and so about a topic that could be like either boring, like you're going to read a book on infertility,
Yeah. I know.
She makes it so interesting, and you start to feel what it might be like. Because I remember like being in church and Mother's Day, all the mothers stand up, and you're just, you're sitting there, and you're just stuff like that. You don't realize when somebody's never had children, and why don't you have children? Didn't you want children? Just those kind of questions, and when your body works against you in whatever ways, it's a hard thing for people to go through. And I experienced it myself, but like your character, I just turned it around. But I was also given divine guidance to kind of do so, and I listened to my divine guidance. So that was my saving grace, because I had never felt darkness like I felt when I realized I could never have a child. And I felt guilt and shame because I didn't try earlier. I didn't keep the one child that I could have kept. That was haunting me. And so I just, went on this journey to make living amends. And so that's why I serve children right now. And I'm good now. I'm better, and I'm okay with everything. Everything turned out the way it's supposed to be. But getting to that point, you need some help. And so there are people out there to help you with that. You're not alone. And you're not alone. You're not the only woman that can't have children. There's other women out there too.
Yeah.
And we're here to help you.
Exactly. And the experiences are very common. That's the thing. People think they're going through it on their own. They feel like they're going crazy. They feel like they're the only ones experiencing these emotions. And in fact, they're not alone. So they're never alone.
Yeah. We got 1 minute. I'm going to close the show. So please buy the book. The links are always in the notes. You can just click the link. She's on Amazon. Check out her website. Check out her cause, suicide prevention. Is there anything you would like to say before we close out?
I would just like to say thank you so much. I really, really am so grateful to be here, and I love your energy, and I'm so grateful that this is, I think, divine intervention. Here we go. I put something out there and you answer the cause, and if this can get my book to a few more people that really need help, then I'm very, very grateful. So thank you.
You're so welcome. I know my first Australia. So hello, Australia. They're going to see mostly on YouTube because they're sleeping right now.
Well, let me see. It's 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah, don't tell them that they need to get up for the live, because I'm on YouTube. My channel is Hummingbird Jewel on YouTube. Please subscribe. That would really be helpful to me. And share. Please share.
Yeah.
Sharing does a lot. There's a lot of word of mouth, and you never know. And I'll be looking for that movie.
Yeah,
I think it's going to happen. I see it. All right. Bless your heart.
Thank you.
And it was beautiful meeting you. And goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.